Have you ever wondered why you can't find peace, even when you've searched everywhere for it? What if the peace you seek has been inside you all along? What if the answers you've been looking for were not out there, but right here? In the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we often search for peace in the wrong places. We think that if we could just escape the noise, the stress, and the chaos, we would finally find the peace we crave. But what if peace isn't something to be found outside of ourselves? What if it's a feeling we need to create, right where we are? Meet Ethan. A man in his early 30s, living in a city that never sleeps. His life is a blur of work, meetings, emails, and the constant pressure of keeping up. But despite all his success, he feels lost, tired, unhappy. No matter how much he achieves, something inside him feels unfulfilled. After years of chasing after the next promotion, the next achievement, Ethan realized something. Nothing in the world could fill the emptiness inside him. His relationships were strained. His career, though successful, felt hollow. And no matter how many vacations he took, or how many weekends he spent in nature, the peace he was looking for remained elusive. It wasn't just the workload that drained him, but the constant conflict, the political games at work, the expectations, the pressure. Every day felt like an endless cycle of stress and disappointment. There seemed to be no way out. One day, after a particularly overwhelming week, Ethan stumbled upon an article that caught his eye. How a spiritual retreat can bring you the peace you're seeking. The article spoke about a remote monastery, high in the mountains, known for its serene environment and its ability to help people reconnect with themselves. It promised a place where people could disconnect from the world, find silence, and ultimately, find peace. In that moment, something clicked inside Ethan. Maybe this was what he needed, a chance to escape it all, to find that elusive peace. So, he made a decision. He packed his bags, left everything behind, and set off on a journey. No more meetings, no more deadlines, no more distractions. Only peace. Only silence. A new chapter was about to begin. Ethan arrived at the monastery with high hopes, filled with the belief that he was about to enter a world where peace reigned supreme. He imagined quiet mornings, peaceful meditation, and simple living. This was his last hope, to find the one thing that had eluded him for so long. The air was crisp. The sound of birds singing and the rustling of leaves filled the air. Ethan felt an immediate sense of calm, almost as if he had found his haven. For the first time in a long time, he felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. Could this be it? Could this place finally be the peace he had been seeking all his life? He walked slowly through the temple courtyard, taking in the serenity of the place. The monks moved about quietly in the background, tending to their duties. The monastery was exactly as he had imagined, a place where the outside world could not reach him. But little did Ethan know, his journey had only just begun. In the first few days at the monastery, Ethan felt as though he had been reborn. Every morning, he woke to a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. The air was fresh, the sounds of nature filled the space, and a quiet peace settled around him. It was as though the noise and stress of the outside world had been left behind. In this new space, he could finally breathe freely. Ethan joined the monks in their daily rituals, the early morning prayers, the quiet hours of meditation, and the simple rhythmic life of the monastery. Everything felt so different from the hectic pace of his city life. The days here were slower, quieter, and filled with purpose. It felt like he had found exactly what he was looking for, a place of peace, a place to heal. He woke up early each day, following the monks in their routines. The mornings began with chanting, and while he didn't understand all the words, there was something deeply calming about the rhythm of the prayers. Afterward, he would join the group in silent meditation, trying to quiet his mind. At first, it wasn't easy. His thoughts still raced, and memories of his stressful life in the city tried to pull him back. But with each passing day, the silence began to feel more natural. He could feel the weight of his worries slowly begin to lift. There were no emails to check, no meetings to attend, no deadlines to meet. Time seemed to slow down. He spent his days doing simple tasks, helping with chores around the monastery, walking through the gardens, and being present in every moment. There was no rush, no pressure. Everything was peaceful. It was a stark contrast to the frantic pace he had known for so long. As the days passed, Ethan started to feel more at ease. The peacefulness of the monastery wasn't just in the absence of noise, it was in the simplicity of life here. He was learning to live fully in the present moment. Whether it was eating a simple meal with the monks, sitting in the quiet courtyard, or meditating under the trees, every moment seemed to be filled with a calm he hadn't known existed. Ethan began to believe that peace wasn't something you find outside yourself. It wasn't about escaping the world. It was about finding stillness within. And in the quiet of the monastery, it was easier than ever to do that. There were no distractions, no phone buzzing, no conversations about work or the world's problems, just stillness, just quiet. The more time Ethan spent in this peaceful environment, the more he realized that true peace comes from silence, from slowing down, and from being fully present. The outside world didn't seem to matter anymore. The noise, the constant demands of life, they didn't touch him here. He felt safe in the stillness, like he could finally find a sense of inner peace. Every evening, after a day of meditation, Ethan would sit outside, gazing up at the stars, feeling more connected to the world than he ever had. It was as if, for the first time, he wasn't just going through the motions of life, he was living fully in the present moment. No worries about the future, no regrets about the past. Just a quiet heart, at peace with itself. And in that silence, Ethan realized something important. The peace he had been looking for wasn't somewhere out there. It was inside him all along. The monks, the rituals, the beautiful surroundings, they had all helped him get closer to this truth. But the real transformation was happening within him. At first, Ethan thought he had found exactly what he was searching for. The monastery was calm, the air fresh, and everything seemed perfect. But after a few weeks, something began to shift within him. Despite the serene surroundings, a subtle feeling of dissatisfaction started to grow. It was as if the peace he had come here to find was just beyond his grasp, hidden beneath the surface. At first, it was small things, tiny cracks in the perfect image he had built of the monastery. He noticed that, although the monks were supposed to embody peace and mindfulness, not all of them practiced what they preached. Some would gather in groups during their breaks, gossiping about others, talking about who had said what, who had done what. There were even heated debates about rituals, how the monastery should be run, and who was doing things the right way. It was disorienting for Ethan. This wasn't the peaceful, harmonious environment he had envisioned. It felt more like the world he had left behind, one full of judgment and division. It wasn't just the gossip that bothered him, it was the underlying tension. Some monks seemed critical of others, not just in their words but in their actions. He saw subtle signs of impatience, resentment, things that didn't align with the peaceful energy he had expected the monastery to embody. Ethan couldn't help but question everything. How could this be? If everyone was here to find peace, why were there so many hidden conflicts and frustrations? The peaceful world he had imagined began to unravel. He had come to the monastery to escape the noise of the outside world, but it seemed like the noise was following him, just in a quieter, more subtle form. These small disagreements, these tensions, began to add up. At first, he brushed them off, convincing himself that they were just part of the process, part of the human condition. But the more he observed, the more he realized how deeply these issues were affecting him. The most troubling part was how these small issues began to seep into his own thoughts. He found himself becoming irritated by things that hadn't bothered him before. The way some monks would leave their belongings out of place, the petty arguments over trivial matters, and the judgmental attitudes some monks had towards others. Ethan had come to the monastery to escape conflict. But it seemed that conflict was everywhere. It was just hidden beneath the surface. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. It felt like no matter where he went, there would always be problems. Always people who didn't live up to expectations. Was it him? Was he expecting too much? He began to wonder if his quest for the perfect place was unrealistic. Was he looking for a place that didn't exist? Had he been too idealistic in thinking that a monastery could offer him the peace he so desperately longed for? One evening, Ethan sat alone in his room, staring at the walls. He found himself lost in thought, the weight of his doubts pressing down on him. Maybe he was wrong to believe that peace could be found in a place like this. He had come to the monastery hoping to escape the noise of the world, but instead, he found more of the same, just quieter, more subtle. The monks weren't perfect, and the environment wasn't the sanctuary he had imagined. Was it him? Ethan wondered. Had he put too much pressure on himself to find the perfect place, the perfect life? He started doubting his own expectations. Maybe he was the one who needed to change, not the world around him. Perhaps peace wasn't something he could find by running away to a quiet place. Maybe it was something he needed to cultivate within himself, no matter where he was. But then again, was it so wrong to expect peace when he had sought it for so long? Was it unrealistic to want a place of true silence and harmony? The questions piled up in his mind, and Ethan couldn't find any answers. He sat on the edge of his bed, feeling more lost than he had in weeks. For the first time since arriving, he wasn't sure if he had made the right choice. If the monastery wasn't the answer, then what was? Was there truly a place that could offer the peace he was seeking? Or had he been chasing an illusion all along? For the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't certain of anything. Maybe peace wasn't something to be found in a place at all. Maybe it was something he had to create within himself. Feeling overwhelmed and lost in his frustration, Ethan finally reached a breaking point. He couldn't keep his thoughts to himself any longer. He needed answers. The peace he had come seeking seemed to slip further away with each passing day, and the doubts in his mind were growing louder. So, one afternoon, after a restless morning, he approached the master, hoping that the wise monk might help him understand where he was going wrong. Ethan sat down before the master, his heart weighed down with unspoken questions. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "Master," he began, his frustration seeping through, "I came here hoping to find peace. But instead of peace, all I see are conflicts. The monks gossip, there are constant disagreements, and the calm I imagined is nowhere to be found. Maybe I'm not meant to be here." The master sat quietly, listening intently. His expression remained calm, unruffled. He didn't interrupt. He simply absorbed Ethan's words, letting them sink in. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. "Ethan," the master said, his eyes meeting Ethan's with an unwavering intensity, "before you decide to leave, I want you to do something for me. It's a simple task, but it holds a lesson you need to understand." Ethan, puzzled and growing impatient, looked up at him. "What task, master?" he asked. "Go to the well, fill a cup with water, and walk around the garden without spilling a single drop. When you are done, return to me." Ethan frowned, clearly confused. "But master," he protested, "what does walking around with a cup of water have to do with finding peace? How will that help me understand why I feel this way?" The master's smile was faint, but his gaze remained steady and unwavering. "You'll understand when you've completed the task. Go now, and when you're finished, we will talk." Though still uncertain, Ethan agreed. He walked to the well, filled the cup with water, and began to slowly make his way around the garden. With each step, he became intensely aware of the delicate balance of the water in his hand. It felt as though the rest of the world had faded away, leaving him with only one thing to focus on: keeping the water steady, making sure not to spill a single drop. As he walked, he passed monks who were working, chatting, and moving about the grounds. Their conversations, their movements, none of it reached him. Ethan didn't react to their voices or the noise around him. His entire focus was on the task at hand, the fragile cup in his hand. He walked slowly, carefully, absorbed entirely in the rhythm of his steps, ensuring that the water remained still. For the first time since arriving at the monastery, Ethan didn't think about the petty conflicts around him. He didn't care about the gossip or the small irritations he had once let bother him. His entire focus was on the water in his cup. The chatter of the monks, the slight rustling of leaves, the occasional whispers, all of it faded into the background. In that moment, nothing existed except the delicate balance of the water steady in his hands. As he completed his circuit around the garden and returned to the master, Ethan felt an unexpected sense of accomplishment. He hadn't spilled a single drop. The task had been simple, but there was a strange satisfaction in the fact that he had done it. Still, a question lingered in his mind, gnawing at him. What was the point of this exercise? What had he truly learned? The master met him with a quiet gaze, his eyes calm but penetrating. "Well, Ethan," the master asked, his voice gentle yet filled with purpose, "did you hear any of the noise around you while you were walking?" Ethan took a moment to reflect. "No, master. I was so focused on the water, I didn't hear anything else." The master nodded. "Did you spill a single drop?" "No," Ethan replied, a small sense of pride swelling in his chest. "Exactly," the master said, his voice warm. "Now, while you were walking, did you notice any of the gossip, any of the arguments, any of the distractions that once bothered you?" Ethan thought about it for a moment. "No, I didn't. I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was only thinking about the water in my cup." The master's smile deepened, a quiet understanding passing between them. "You see, Ethan, the world will always be full of distractions. Noise, conflict, disagreements. There will always be things trying to pull you away from your peace. But when you focus on what truly matters, when you give your full attention to the present moment, the distractions fade away. They no longer have power over you." Ethan's mind started to clear. He realized then what had been eluding him. He had spent so much of his time obsessing over the imperfections of others and the chaos around him that he had missed the most important lesson. Peace wasn't something you found in the world. It was something you created within. The outside world would always be imperfect, filled with noise, conflict, and frustration. But his inner peace, That was his to control. And that peace didn't come from avoiding the world or running away from discomfort. It came from within, from the ability to remain focused, centered, and present. The master's voice, calm and steady, carried the weight of his wisdom. Peace, Ethan, is not about avoiding the world around you. It is about learning to stay centered, to focus on what matters, and to not let the noise of the world disturb your inner calm. When you are fully present, when you are fully focused, the distractions lose their power. Ethan stood in silence, letting the master's words sink in, feeling as though a veil had been lifted from his eyes. He had spent so much time searching for peace in the wrong places, in the monastery, in the people around him, in the absence of conflict. But now, he understood. Peace was never something to be found out there. It was something to be cultivated, a state of mind, a way of being. For the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt a profound shift inside himself. He no longer needed to change the world or the people around him. He needed to change how he responded to them. Peace wasn't about escaping from distractions. It was about learning to focus on what truly mattered and letting go of the things that no longer served him. Looking at the master, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come seeking peace, and now he realized that the peace he had been looking for had always been within him. It wasn't a place to find. It was a way of being present, in the moment, with himself and with the world around him. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling different. The frustration and disappointment that had weighed on him for so long seemed to have evaporated overnight. As he went about his daily tasks around the monastery, sweeping the garden, attending meditation sessions, walking the quiet paths, he noticed that he no longer felt the same pressure or restlessness that had once consumed him. The monks around him continued with their conversations and routines, but Ethan didn't get drawn into them. He no longer felt the urge to react to the small conflicts or distractions. The words of the master echoed softly in his mind. Peace is not about escaping the world or finding a perfect place. It is about mastering your own mind and maintaining your focus, no matter where you are or who you're with. For the first time, Ethan began to truly understand the master's teaching. He had spent so much of his time searching for peace in external circumstances, in the silence of the monastery, in the absence of conflict. But now he saw that peace wasn't a place, nor was it tied to a particular situation. It was a state of mind, a skill to be cultivated. If he could stay focused on his purpose, if he could learn to control his reactions, then peace would always be within his grasp, no matter where he was or what was happening around him. Ethan began to see that everything around him, the distractions, the gossip, the small arguments among the monks, was transient. It wasn't the environment that needed to change, but his relationship to it. The noise, the friction, and the chaos were a part of life. What mattered was whether he allowed them to disturb his inner calm. True peace wasn't about the absence of conflict, but the ability to remain undisturbed by it. As the days went by, Ethan found himself more and more present in each moment. During meditation, he felt a deeper sense of connection to himself, a deeper sense of inner peace. He no longer felt the need to escape into an ideal world because he understood that perfection didn't exist. There would always be challenges, there would always be noise, and there would always be people who tested his patience. But peace wasn't about running away from those things. It was about learning how to respond to them with calmness and clarity. His relationships with the other monks began to shift as well. Where once he had seen their actions as disruptions or sources of irritation, he now recognized that they too were on their own journeys, each with their own struggles. Instead of judging or feeling frustrated by their flaws, he found himself offering more patience and compassion. He stopped focusing on what bothered him and began to focus on what he could control, his own reactions and mindset. Ethan realized that the search for peace wasn't about finding a perfect place or escaping life's inevitable challenges. It was about mastering his own mind, staying present, and learning to let go of the things that didn't serve him. When he stopped seeking peace in external circumstances and began to look inward, he finally started to feel at peace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in soft pinks and purples, Ethan sat in the garden, reflecting on how far he had come. The monastery hadn't changed. The monks around him were still the same, but Ethan had changed. He no longer needed everything to be perfect to feel at peace. He had learned that peace was not a destination, but a practice, a journey that began within. As the cool evening breeze whispered through the trees, Ethan made his decision. He would stay at the monastery, not because it was perfect, but because he had learned to cultivate peace within himself. No matter what was happening around him, he no longer needed to search for the ideal place or perfect people. He had found the peace he sought inside himself, and now He was ready to continue his journey, not as someone still searching for peace, but as someone who had found it. As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself settling into a new rhythm at the monastery. He woke up early every morning, performed his duties with care, and spent hours in quiet reflection and meditation. The initial excitement of discovering peace in a new place had faded, but something deeper had begun to take root. Ethan no longer saw the monastery as a place of perfect tranquility. Instead, he began to view it as a place to practice mastering his own mind, a place to learn how to be at peace, no matter what was happening around him. The other monks, with their small quarrels and personal differences, no longer bothered him. Ethan no longer felt the need to escape or change anything outside of himself. He realized that, just as the master had said, true peace came not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it without letting it disturb his inner calm. In the evenings, after a long day of work and meditation, Ethan would sit in the peaceful courtyard, looking out over the garden. The wind would rustle through the trees, and the sounds of the monastery, the monks going about their routines, the occasional chatter, all blended together into a soothing backdrop. There was no chaos. There was no rushing. Just the present moment. Ethan knew now that the real transformation wasn't about finding a perfect place or escaping life's inevitable challenges. The transformation was about how he chose to respond to the world. He realized that no matter where he went, whether in the city or in the monastery, there would always be noise, distractions, and challenges. But it was up to him whether he allowed those things to disturb his peace. Ethan no longer sought peace as something outside of himself. He had discovered that peace was not a place. It was a practice, an ongoing journey. The more he focused on being present, on mastering his own thoughts and emotions, the more he understood that peace could exist even in the midst of chaos. Peace was not a destination. It was a state of mind. One day, as he was walking through the garden, Ethan realized that he had found exactly what he had been looking for all along, not in the silence of the monastery, but in the stillness of his own mind. And with that realization came a final, powerful insight. Peace is not about escaping the world. It is about facing it with a calm mind and a steady heart. It is not the absence of conflict that brings peace, but the ability to be centered in the midst of it. Ethan smiled to himself. The journey was not over, but he had learned the most important lesson. True peace was never something to be found outside of himself. It was something to be cultivated within. He knew that no matter where his path took him, he would carry that peace with him, because he had learned that peace was always available, no matter where he was, as long as he remembered to look inward.